Hello and welcome to Steven University. This week we're tackling Rose's Room, an episode that I had no real thoughts on when I originally watched it, other than that it was some cool ideas. Liked a lot less the second time round, but for those of you who don't remember, it's the episode where Steven wants to go play mini golf with the gems. When he can't do that, he gets real bratty about it, wants his own room. The gem responds, gives him access to Rose's room, and it all gets a bit weird from there. Then he comes out and learns no lesson at all. So, because he gets what he wanted in the end.
Very specifically no lesson. Like, there's a line at the very end,
Yeah.
which just makes it really clear that he's learned no lesson.
Yeah, literally. He just sort of says, like, I always get what I want. And, like, I don't know. When I first watched this episode, Chris, and I know we usually go to your thoughts, but I just want to get this off my chest, because when I first watched this episode, I watched it when I was watching the show in bulk, the first batch of episodes I got to get to. And my overriding memory of this episode was that it was a cool mythology thing to show us what Rose's room can do, is like, all that stuff. And that was my overriding thought. But in watching it in this context, where we sort of analyse it and think about what the episode achieves and doesn't achieve, I came out a lot more negative, because I just feel like it could have been so, like, there was such a clear lesson to teach him here about, like, being selfish and about, like, I don't know, like, not always being able to get what you want, but be patient, and, things might come, and, that sort of stuff. But he learns nothing and achieves nothing, and the episode might as well not exist in that sense. I mean, the only thing that you get out of it is of course, which is the cool thing, but it is the idea of seeing Rose's room. So I don't know. It's a bit weird. I'm very torn. About in that sense.
My bigger thing, because you see it's called Rose's Room, and you're like, ooh. Well, a thought for the show that I will give it credit for is, when he goes, I've done it, yay, 4 custard things, like he's eaten 4 of them. As I was watching it, went, and I thought, oh god, like the show must have me a little bit, because I'd have just been like, oh, what the fuck, at the beginning. Do you know what I mean? But it was such a typical. But I was literally like, and that tiny noise made me like, oh, I'm a fan. So there's that. So that's where I am with the show as a whole. Just for, if you ask. But you see Rose's room, and it starts, and he's like, give me a place of my own, and they're like, no, don't do it. And it's a really cool start, and you're like, oh shit, his mum's room, wow. But then they don't. My bigger thing, rather than him not learning, although that was the episode ended, and I was like, oh, my first question to Dad is going to be, does that very last line completely negate the episode?
A little bit. I'm not going to lie. That bothered me a lot more on this watch through.
So that was my first thought. But my overarching thing was the room gives him what he wants, literally, and that can be a bad thing because it's not real. That they do that 20 times. Like that's my problem with it. They didn't really, and it's not even overly cool visually. Like the show's done much more impressive things with the visuals. So rather than the lesson thing, which was my immediate thought and did annoy me afterwards, I was just a bit like, I'm not sure they really did much with it. It wasn't as cool as the premise that it presents.
Yeah, because I suppose you're right. I suppose what you're looking for as a viewer at this point, when you see Rose's room, is a bit more information about the mum, bit more information about what she was like, little hints and, things like that. And it doesn't give you even that.
No.
So the connection to his mum is almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
And you're right. Would it have been a more powerful episode had they actually played on that? Or would it have been a stronger episode if it was just a silly Steven gets himself into some sort of gem-based jape, where maybe he tries to use the launch pad without the warp pad, without their permission, because he's always seen them come and go on those warp pad things, and he does something wrong while on the warp pad and ends up in somewhere weird, and then a bit weird stuff happens and he comes back. You have the same basic episode premise that way. The only difference is,
you're not teasing with some big arc thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of the sort of continuity of it, it's really cool because in the episode Together Breakfast, when he visits the other Gem's rooms, he slides down that pole from Pearl's room, and that slide seems forever, and then eventually he ends up in Amethyst's like little junk room, doesn't he? But there's a bit where he's sliding down, and it sort of seems really scary. He's like, "Oh, this is bad," and then suddenly there's a room with a pink background filled with light pink crowds for a few seconds, and he goes, "Ah," and then it goes back to being bad again. And the joke is, he's scared, then he's not scared, then he's scared again. But from a continuity perspective, that pink room we now know is Rose's room.
Rose's room, yeah.
And that's just really cool. Like from a continuity perspective, like it's neat to think that they planted that back in episode what Together Breakfast is what, episode 3?
Yeah, it's
I want-
early. 'Cause
it's
that's
one of the
during that
first-
run where it's all about
I
food.
think it's 4. I think it's episode 4.
I did, and also you get to see like all the characters, admittedly like dream state versions, but
Mhm.
getting to see all of them and seeing, because I think if you were watching it normally, you probably wouldn't have as much appreciation for how big the town and cast of characters has become. But this kind of hits you over the head with it a bit more.
Yeah, and lots of references to old episodes. Frybo.
Yeah.
Connie shows up with the bracelet from Bubble Buddies. Meat Beat Mania from Arcade Mania shows up. We see the Lion Lickers, obviously, from the very first episode.
I thought it was quite
Go on.
cool that Connie said he's amazing, because it felt like the room was giving him what he wanted, and what he wanted was to hear Connie compliment him or be glowing about him. I thought
Yes.
that was quite cool.
Yes, that is cool. I will also say that, you know, the Wailing Stone, the item they bring back while Steven's playing his golf game, his golf based RPG. The Wailing Stone, that comes back.
Yeah,
Just as a little tease. For
I
you
don't
there,
remember
Chris.
that the first time round. Where was that?
So when Steven's playing his golf game, they've been on a mission. They have some thing called a Wailing Stone, and Amethyst presses the
Yeah.
button and it makes a load of noise.
Yeah.
That stone comes back later.
Oh,
on.
it comes back later, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought you were saying it was a return for the stone, right? Okay, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I'm giving you a pre heads up that is
Oh, okay.
that object they've acquired. Again, continuity being what it is in the show, comes back.
Let's that is cool. Sorry, did you have anything else to say?
I was just gonna say, in terms of continuity as well, that golf bag is actually from a laser light cannon. You know, when they go through his old
nice.
junk room to get the laser light cannon,
Yeah.
the golf clubs he finds in that room.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's just so much, like, this episode is just full of references to other episodes.
Did you feel though, because one thing we touched upon and should maybe just touch upon in our last few minutes, do you think that it kind of goes back on some character progression we've had? Is that the big problem? Because he really does come across like a child and like a that's irrelevant, the sneeze, like a whiny child that can't get his way, and it just, there's been a lot of character growth and that reflects none of it.
Damn it, I thought you were going to talk for a little bit longer, so I took a gamble and took a sip of my drink, and I was mid-sip of my drink
No,
and
you
you
shouldn't
finished.
have gambled when I just sneezed. That was your error there.
Yeah,
'cause
that
I'd
was.
clearly have to deal with the sneeze.
Yeah, gotcha. I didn't calculate all the variables, did I? Did I, Chris? I feel almost a little bit like this episode may have originally been intended to show up earlier in the run, because it does feel like a big step backwards for him in terms of his progression. He is, especially in the moment when they first come back and they interrupt his game, it does feel very childish.
Yeah, but not all the characters would have been established early in the run. I see your point, because then you go, oh well, maybe they didn't want to touch upon the mum too early. But there's a lot of, well, I suppose, Connie's that would have been the last one of them to be introduced, and she was introduced relatively early, I suppose.
Episode 8, I want to say, or maybe 9, Connie. So I don't know, because we're nearly at episode 20 now. What is this? 19? I think this is 19.
Yes, 19, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting from my perspective because, yeah, no, I think that that's a thought that occurs to me, and I wonder, am I legitimately suggesting this episode was developed much earlier than the others, or is it just that noticeable a character reversal, or sort of one step forward, two steps back?
I think you're trying to make excuses for the show.
Yeah, I almost want to explain it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's unfortunate, because I think that's a sign of weaker writing. So for me, it's problematic for a lot of reasons in that sense. It certainly is one of the weaker episodes I've seen on this rewatch. I did not remember it being like that at all, though, because I think, again, as part of a big bulk watch, it slips under the radar as just, oh, cool, we got a glimpse of Rose's room. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And the logic again of the world is still really clever, because like this idea that that the gem specifically opens the door. So obviously all the gems have their have gems on the door, so it's like it's opening and stuff. It's all like even little things like that which they don't explain, but we've seen them open those doors with their gems previously. So you just inherently know that's how it works. So when Steven's,
you know what that is.
Yeah, so when Steven's gem lights up and the gem on the door lights up and it opens, they don't even need really to be like Rose's room. You get it, like it's there, like it's, and that is a testament to the show's cleverness, because that's something like you pick up just as an observer of the show, like as somebody who's noticing things as it goes. So you wouldn't even really need that explaining to you unless you were a brand new viewer. And if you were a brand new viewer, God forbid this be your first episode, because you ain't coming back. One thing I liked really as well, I will say, in terms of like complimenting the episode, is they did do some funny stuff with like when it all gets a bit weird. It's like he steps out of the big donut and Onion is there, and what I laughed at most was just that like he didn't notice how weird Onion was being, because it's Onion, and Onion's a freaky character anyway. So like he didn't notice that things were off at that point. Also,
they did that with the dad as well, like played on the dad's advice always being a bit weird.
Yes,
just making it ramp up and get weirder and weirder and more generic and more generic.
Definitely, and the dad was the closest to being like the actual person of all of them. But even he was, and although I will say that that's the other thing that bothers me a little bit, is just that it took Steven a bit too long to work it out, in my opinion.
Yeah, basically took his dad eating a donut, like to make Steven realise his donut probably wasn't going to work.
Whereas I knew he was still in the room almost immediately.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it was very clear. It was not well hidden. So yeah, disappointing, I think, in many ways, because it has. I think the bigger disappointment, and you're gonna get mad at me again, Chris, because I'm gonna bring up the episode that shall not be named, but I'm gonna scoot around its name just to slightly. But when you look at an episode like that is outright, not good for X, Y, and Z reasons that we talked about at the time. And then you look at this one, I think partly the reason this one is bad is because it's such a missed opportunity, rather than because it is in itself a terrible episode. There's still some funny lines, the animation is still great, the characters are all still lovable, you get a glimpse at like Rose's room, you get a weird insight into how big the town is, and a little reminder of how things have gone. There's loads of continuity, which I've brought up. There are a lot of things that are there. It's just frustrating because it's a missed opportunity on two fronts. Discovering more about Rose, which when you're calling it Rose's room, at least give us something, I think. That's a fair point. And, and not actually having Steven learn a lesson. Those are two pretty big flaws. You're going to be silent for a second and then get mad at me, aren't you?
The problem is I've been silent so much that they'll be like, oh, Chris is about to be silent. So I feel like I can't be silent and angry because you've brought it up, the episode that shan't be named. But equally, I'm legitimately pissed off about it. So you've put me in an awkward position, Dan.
But I do
agree with your points.
I was gonna say, because what I don't understand is, like, Chris, you've created a situation where I literally it's the prime example of when the show doesn't work. So of course I'm going to bring it up occasionally, at least. Because it's relevant to the discussion. You've created a situation where I literally have to go, oh God, I need to make a point here that's relevant to that. But to deal with that, Chris is going to have to be silent and grumpy for 30 seconds.
There's been other bad episodes. Look them up.
Not on that level.
No, of course not. No.
So on the whole, where do you like? That was sort of my summary of how I feel about the episode. I don't know if you necessarily 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts. I think I think it comes down to, and this is potentially just a more concise way of saying what you just said, but it comes down to what I said earlier. The the premise and promise of it is a lot cooler than what they do with it. That's not saying it's executed badly. It's just the route they go with that premise isn't
as satisfying,
cool as it could be.
Yeah, it could have been a lot more satisfying an episode. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Also, a little bit of info for you, Chris, because you know
who doesn't love that.
Yeah, you like a bit of info. The floating whale, unbeknownst to Stephen at this point, but noticeable to someone like myself, speaks in Rose's voice.
Oh, cool.
No,
that is cool.
I thought you'd like that as a little,
yeah,
because that's the sort of thing.
It's an episode you must get more from this episode on rewatch. You know, when you know shit like that.
Yeah, well, the room has come back a few times since this episode, and is used in different ways, and it's interesting to see them using this to introduce the concept. Because the thing is, right? So part of my fan brain is going, yeah, but they're setting this up so they can use it later, and then the realistic brain goes, but no, episodes still have to exist and function as a piece of entertainment on their own.
Yeah,
you can't say, oh yeah, you're right. It's not the best, but you know what? It's really important to this. That's not acceptable as an excuse. So I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I'm gonna double down on my point of it not being that solid an episode, because I just think that's important. Did you also notice that the whole time Stephen was in the room, it seems to have not much time or no time at all seems to have passed on the outside?
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool.
Because when he comes back out, the gems are in the exact same position when he comes out. I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. There we go.
All right.
Awkward ending.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll see you next week for Coach Stephen.
For more of the same.
Got a hint for next week, Chris?
Yeah, why not?
It's got a song.
Sweet.
I like a good song.
I love a song.
I think this has gotten awkwarder somehow. Doing something I didn't think was possible.
Feels like usually these feel like forced awkwardness, but this feels genuinely awkward.
Yeah, we've earned this one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end it here. We'll see you next week
See ya.
for Coach Stephen.